place you want to be. The LMS show, nowhere else. Seen locally and seen around the world. We got the countries that just check it in, England, everybody just checking. They just love the LMS show. We would like to thank you so much for coming to our space today. And this space, not our space, this is everyone, Sisters Uptown Bookstore. Give them a big hand. In a few minutes, we're going to take it down. The first black man that broke the barrier in baseball, Jackie Robinson, and Mr. Williams is going to talk about him in a few minutes. Take it down. And welcome back to the LMS show. Give yourselves a big hand again. I met this young gentleman, in fact, his sisters. His mother, in fact, wrote a book about her times during the Second World War, when she was a GI's wife, right?
Yes, she was.
A GI's wife. And, oh, boy, the segregation back then was running rapid. I mean, you can do anything. You know, every time I sit back and think about how some of my brothers and sisters, you know, they take things for granted. Because it wasn't like that. So-called y'all got free in the last 50 years, and you ain't really free. But without no further ado, I'd like to introduce to Mr. Mack Williams. Give him a big hand, everybody.
Thank you very much.
You told me about this book, Jackie Robinson, and you read it to the children today. What was their reaction?
Well, first of all, I want to just thank you so much for having me on the LMS show. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be at Sisters. What a great venue this is. And we had a great time earlier this afternoon reading to the kids. As a matter of fact, one of the kids, Sister Jennifer's grandson, read to us.
Isn't that something?
He read the book to us. And then we got into a little Q&A afterwards.
Oh, that is so nice. Well, they say with two or more gather, you know, whatever. I'm glad on that. Tell us a bit about this book by Jackie Robinson.
Well, what I first say is I started doing it a long time ago.
Okay, how long?
If you would believe, probably about 17 years. I would start and then put it down, and then start back and put it down. And ultimately, I thought, I've just got to get it out and get it done. Because actually, you know, all these starts and stops, every time I picked it up, I had something new. And then I'd go back to the illustrator and say, I need some more illustrations. I need some more illustrations. But what also happened was, with technology, the expense of publishing a full-color book independently went down, and it made it much easier to get this done.
You publish this independently, right?
Yes, I did.
You see the rise of independent publishers? You know, people like you write their own books and publish their own books. You see the rise of that?
Well, one reason I believe that it is rising is because you don't need to be endorsed, if you will, by Simon and Schuster or.
Well, we won't mention names, but
my bad.
But you know that's okay. But you don't have to be endorsed by publishing companies, right?
Right.
Okay.
If you have something that you feel is valid.
I read a couple of Simon and Schuster, but they're pretty good. But go ahead.
If you have something that you feel is valid, you can get it out there before the public. You don't have to wait for somebody else to say that what you have is worthwhile being read by the public. And so that is the good thing about the rise of independent publications.
Jackie Robinson. You know, sometimes we hear this story over and over again, but it has to be reinforced. Why?
Well, the thing about Jackie Robinson, I've always been in awe of people who gave of themselves in a way that many people would not have. a case in point, Martin Luther King. This is a man who could have settled into a life, a very comfortable life, as a Baptist preacher. And he could have had, 2 houses in the suburbs and a big car and this, that, and the other. But he sacrificed. He sacrificed his life for us, essentially. And the things that we are able to do now are in part because of the people who sacrificed, like Martin Luther King, like Jackie Robinson.
He took a lot of, Mr. Ricky had other people in mind, other folks in mind, but he didn't want them. He wanted Jackie. Why did he want Jackie?
Well, one reason that he wanted Jackie was that he knew that Jackie had an Army background, he had a college background, and he knew that Jackie was a leader. He knew Jackie was very intelligent, and he knew that Jackie was tough. And by being tough, he didn't necessarily mean somebody who could throw down with their fists. He needed somebody who was intellectually tough, who was spiritually tough, because he knew that there were going to be people who were going to get on Jackie, who were going to try to rile him. And the reason was that if Jackie fought back, he would be described by the media, by the other players and managers, etc., as being a hothead, temperamental. And that would have set the cause of integration in the major leagues back by many years.
I think about it, like, I remember when I was working on that plantation, and they had someone told me that I was one angry man. Well, I should be angry for a whole lot of reasons, and we had to stand up for you. You had to stand up for right. Well, sometimes even working on that plantation, I had to eat crow. Mm-hmm. So I guess in certain cases, Jackie had to eat crow, in a sense, because these people, because the places that he couldn't go to some of these places, like they say like to a restaurant, or like down south restaurant and places like that, right?
That's right. In fact, in the early years, as depicted in the movie 42, he couldn't stay with the team as they were in spring training down south. He had to stay in the homes of local African Americans. And this is one of the reasons that Ricky wanted a person like that who was mentally tough. Because I had some relatives who one aunt dated somebody in the Negro Leagues, another uncle was very familiar with the time period, and most people would tell you that Robinson was not the best baseball player in the Negro Leagues when he got the call, but he was the right individual for that time.
Also, too, he opened up the door, because remember, I'm not bashing the Yankees, okay? We have Yankee fans in here. The Yankees were one of the last teams, and Boston was the last team that took. Well, they had, you see how they had a little rivalry, but they were the last 2 teams that would accept black players.
That's right.
And Latin players too, okay? You have A-Rod and everybody, but they were the last ones to accept them, right?
And it's funny, you look at the Red Sox now, and they full of black and Latino players.
Oh yeah. The whole thing about they wanted to win, but also too, you mentioned in this book, it was good for Jackie. It was good for the major leagues, baseball league, but also too the black teams. How there was a beginning, and then it was almost like the demise. What you say about that?
Well, that was absolutely true. I think on April 15th, 1947, which is the first day that Robinson played in the major leagues, that date more or less sounded the death knell for the Negro Leagues. It wasn't immediate, but as more and more blacks went into the major leagues, the attendance in the Negro Leagues went down because the stars were in the major leagues. And unfortunately, as we were talking about earlier when the kids were here, unfortunately, we, over the hundreds of years, being fed the diet of the other man is better than you. And so whether it was in the Negro Leagues or restaurants or hotels or whatever, when we got the opportunity to go to this place that previously segregation had kept us out of, we no longer wanted as much to go to these places which had sustained us when we could not go to X hotel, X restaurant, the Brooklyn Dodgers, whatever. And because of that, you know, the Negro Leagues went down.
Also, too, during the time of segregation, the Yankees, when they left town, as an example, they left town. They go on a road trip like back in the in the 30s and 40s, and they used to have like Negro Leagues coming in. And in fact, the team at the ballpark made money off of the Negro Leagues.
They sure did.
They made a fortune, and as a result, later on, the ones who really got hit by this would be like, say, like the leagues, like in the smaller markets, because they used to rely on that. Mm-hmm. They got a beating out of this too, right?
Yes, they did. And an interesting point about that which you just mentioned, which I touched on in the book, while they would do the rentals when the Yankees were on the road trip, the black players wouldn't play games. And during one of those games, one of the great Negro League players named Josh Gibson hit a home run totally out of the stadium.
What?
Like out onto the street. And in fact, there has never been another player who has hit a fair ball out of Yankee Stadium.
Even all these great players that they've been signed up with these $1 million contracts and
with steroids,
and they go astray. Mention your name, but they haven't been repeated, right?
It has never been repeated. Mantle hit a foul ball out of Yankee Stadium, but no one has ever hit a fair ball for an actual home run out of.
In the book,
stadium.
you said that you mentioned that Jackie Robinson led the way for. This little picture. This is an illustration of Rachel Robinson is very active with the Jackie Robinson Foundation, right?
Yes, she is.
She's very active. Also, too, Jackie Robinson was an early investor in the Freedom Bank, the Free National Bank.
Yes, he was.
And Jackie Robinson, he was, and also too, Shots for the Nuts Coffee. When they was trading him, what was your thought about you read when he was traded from? He was going to get traded from the Dodgers to the Giants. To the Giants. What was your thought about that?
Well, I assume that he just figured he wanted to just end his career with the Dodgers because at that time the Dodgers and the Giants had a tremendous rivalry, probably a bit of a heated rivalry.
Like Boston,
like the Yankees in Boston kind of thing right now. And I think he just probably figured he didn't want to go on to the Giants, and he had done 10 years, and he would just call it a day at that point.
Also, too, because of Jackie's great success, as Brandon read earlier, many other African Americans and Latinos will soon play in the major leagues. One, you never forget this gentleman, Roy Campanella, Jackie's teammate on the Dodgers, and one of the all-time great catchers, won the most valuable player award 3 times in his career. Larry Doby, he led the way for that. Larry Doby too, because remember he was the first African American in the American League. Mm-hmm. He led the way for him. Him and Satchel Paige. Remember Satchel Paige?
Yeah.
Who was then over 40 years old. Now you figure you're over 40 over the hill, they got a place for you. But Satchel Paige was still doing it. He helped the Cleveland Indians win a World Series back in 1948, right? Don Newkirk, another longtime teammate of Jackie Robinson, one of the best hitting pitchers in baseball history. He is the only player to have won the Rookie of the Year, the most valuable player, and the Cy Young Award during his career. Last but not least, this gentleman played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was on a mission to help help other people, and he died in a plane crash. In fact, a park is named for him up in the Bronx. Roberto Clemente was one of the greatest outfielders of all times. Joined the Pirates in Pittsburgh Pirates in 1955. Clemente amazed the baseball world with his awesome performance in the 1971 World Series. He led the way, Regina. Also, can't forget Willie Mays. See, yeah. All right, here, you got it. All right, okay. And also, too, a slender young man, Regina from your hometown, Milwaukee, but they moved from Milwaukee to Atlanta. A slender young gentleman named Hank Aaron joined the Milwaukee Braves in 1954. On April 8, 1974, he broke Babe Ruth's all-time home run record and finished his career with how many homers? 755 homers. Give him a big hand. The illustrator who illustrated his book, he did a fine job. How long you knew him?
I've known him for probably about 10, 15 years. His name is David Early.
Okay. He did a very nice job on that.
I'll have to tell him that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we urge people. I'm on public access, that we were doing a public access show. We're going to urge, and we go on YouTube, but we're going to urge you to check out the book. I ain't say buy, check out the book, okay?
Can I say buy it?
No, we can only say it now on public access.
Okay.
They ripped the tape out from me. And then you see, I got to sit back here and listen to that stuff. Well, we took it off because, you didn't do this and do that, all that. Well, look, I got the do's and I get do's and don'ts too. People coming at it. Why can't I do this, LMS? Well, look, I got to sign the contracts to run these shows, okay? So I got to do what I do, okay? It's my party, and I cry if I want to.
All right.
I miss Leslie Gore. But anyway, we'd like to thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, sir.
Give it up to who?
Mack Williams.
Mack Williams. And we'll be right back. And we're back with the LMS show. Give yourselves a big hand. Hooray! That was Little Week. Hooray! We're up here at Sisters Uptown Bookstore and Cultural Center, deep in the heart of Harlem. A couple of months back, this young gentleman ran this. He's a filmmaker. He ran a film. He produced a film called Depressed Black Gay Men. I mean, this. I don't know what to say. It's sad, but then again, how young black men who are gay are being ossified, not by, I think I'll let him tell you. What is your name, my friend?
Antoine Craigwell.
Give Mr. Antoine Craigwell this film that you made. Tell us a bit about it.
Let me just start. I don't know how many people in the room here might know, but on Wednesday, I attended the funeral of a 51-year-old black man, a black gay man, who people said he died from depression. No one dies from depression. The story is that he fell from the 20th floor of his apartment's balcony. But you don't just fall from a balcony if you've been living there for so many years. So the suspicion is that after 51 years, this man who was well known in the community, was always a snappy dresser, very well loved, possibly killed himself. And the question is, why did he do it? What were some of the issues that were going on in his life that remain unresolved. Several years ago, about 2004 or 5, I began to hear stories from friends of mine about where they were in their lives. And many of them were seeming to be stuck in a place and not being able to move on with their lives. So I'm a journalist by trade. That's my training. So I decided, well, I'm going to write an article and see what I can find. But I could find no material, academic or otherwise, that specifically addressed the issue of the factors that contribute to a black gay man descending into depression and wanting to kill himself. So I decided I was going to do a book. And so I interviewed about 40 black gay men from the United States, the Caribbean, and Africa. I interviewed some mental health professionals and some community leaders, including one of the only out black gay imams, which is a Muslim priest, Imam Deya Abdullah, who is in Washington, D.C. But I couldn't find a publisher because nobody wants to publish any material about a black man, about a black gay man, and about a black gay man who's dealing with depression. So I decided I was going to do a film instead because more people are going to respond to that. And so some of the guys who I interviewed for the book decided they were going to sit down in front of a camera and do the unthinkable. That is, to speak about some of the things that caused them to descend into depression, to want them to kill themselves. And it opened up a floodgate of interest because then it became kind of, oh, I was dealing with that too. Oh, I've got that going on as well. Oh, I didn't know that I'm not the only one like that. And so we're hearing more and more people who are coming forward and talking about their experiences. In the black community, there are many people who have been the victims of sexual abuse, men and women, boys and girls. But it's always the family secret. It's kept quiet.
On the down low, right?
Well, not even down low.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only men who abuse men or men who abuse women, there are women who abuse men, sexually abuse them. And what happens to a child who is sexually abused? There's a whole neurological transformation that takes place in that child's life. Or what happens if you get the chance to see the documentary called You Are Not Alone, which Lenny has in his hand, is that at the very beginning, there's a father who sees his young son, probably about 4 or 5, playing with a Mickey Mouse doll. And what he does, he takes a strap and he beats him.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah.
And he says, I will beat the faggot out of you. Mm-hmm. And how many of us in the black community know that we have mothers and fathers who will do that to their children? We know that a few years ago there was a father who suspected that his son might be gay because the son was maybe talking or walking or behaving. The child was only 4 years old, and he killed the child. So this is nothing new. And we've got the church, where many of the black community have turned to religion as a form of comfort, as a form of solace and escape from the daily life. But the church has then turned around and used that element of fear, that very tiny aspect of our humanity, our sexuality, and turned it against us. So then the pastor says to the people in the congregation that somebody who's involved with somebody of the same sex is an abomination. And so the mother and the father goes home and alienates his or her own son because of what the pastor said.
Well, for crazy coincidence, we have a book here talking about that to a certain extent, but on a different
on
level.
A different level. And so what this documentary talks about is looking at those different things that are taking place in our lives in what we've come to call today the microaggressions, the life stressors that black men are dealing with, or the hidden lives that black gay men have to live. Now, some of you in the audience here might, and some of you seeing this might get upset with me when I say, and it's not being misogynistic, Please understand that. But it's from purely observation, and it's from hearing the stories of other people, is that very often a lot of the responsibility lies with our mothers. Our mothers, in terms for men, we look to our mothers to help us form our masculinity, our sexuality, and our sexual identity. And when our mothers deny us who we are likely to fall backwards. There is ample research that shows that a young child who comes into a family and is accepted by his family for who he is, his sexual identity, his sexual orientation is accepted by his parents, that child grows up to be a productive, well-functioning member of society. But we've seen on the flip side that when a mother denies her son who he really is, then in fact he starts to hide, he starts to sneak around, he gets involved with a neighbor, or he is 15, he gets involved with a 25-year-old 3 blocks away. Next thing you know, he contracts HIV, he doesn't tell his mother, he starts to get sick, he hides, he runs, and because she doesn't think about getting him, that he is not, she doesn't think that he's sexually active, so she doesn't think that he needs to get an HIV test. But when he's 22, 23, 24, he gets an HIV test, he finds out he's been HIV positive for 7 or 8 years. So what we have today is a rise in the number of young black men who are having sex with other men between the ages of 13 and 24 who are HIV positive. And the question that the CDC has not been able to sufficiently answer is why is the numbers of young black men on the rise, why the numbers are on the rise of those who are HIV positive. And the problem with this is that we know from medical research is that if you're HIV positive and you're not taking medication, for a black man your lifespan is reduced by 5 years.
5 years?
Yes. But a white man is going to be able to survive. Because you know why?
Why?
Because he's got the resources and the networks to capture him.